When a racist bully shaves her cherished afro in front of the whole school, Amara Johnson doesn't just get even, she steps into the ring to teach him a lesson about respect that neither he nor anyone else will ever forget. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Amara Johnson walked the halls of West Side High with her head held high, her magnificent afro framing her face like a halo. She had spent years growing it out, learning to love and care for her natural hair despite living in a predominantly white suburb where few understood its significance. Her afro was more than just hair. It was her heritage, her identity, her crown. Most days, she ignored the stares and occasional comments. Most days, but not today. Trevor Matthews and his group of followers had been the unofficial rulers of West Side High for too long. A third-generation legacy student whose family name adorned the school gymnasium, Trevor carried himself with the entitled confidence of someone who had never faced consequences. He had been fixating on Amara since she transferred to West Side last semester, making snide remarks whenever teachers weren't within earshot. "Hey, satellite dish!" Trevor called out as Amara passed by his locker. His friends snickered on cue. "You're blocking the hallway with that thing. Some of us are trying to get to class." Amara kept walking, her fingers tightening around her textbooks. She had promised her mother she wouldn't get into trouble at this new school. Her scholarship was too important to risk. Trevor, however, wasn't finished. "I'm talking to you!" He reached out and grabbed a fistful of her hair, yanking her backward. The hallway fell silent as Amara stumbled, dropping her books. Before she could react, Trevor pulled something from his pocket, a small electric razor he'd brought for what he later claimed was just a prank. The buzzing sound filled the suddenly silent hallway. In seconds, a patch of Amara's beautiful afro fell to the linoleum floor. Students gasped. Someone yelled for a teacher. Amara's hand went to her head, feeling the jagged, bald spot where her hair had been moments before. Principal Gladwell's office felt cold and impersonal as Amara sat across from Trevor and his parents. Mr. Matthews, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke over everyone else in the room. "Boys will be boys," he kept repeating, while Mrs. Matthews nodded sympathetically. It was just harmless mischief that went a bit too far. Amara's mother, Dr. Kimberly Johnson, a professor of African American Studies at the community college, sat straight-backed beside her daughter. "What your son did was assault," she said firmly. "He violated my daughter's bodily autonomy and inflicted racial trauma. There is nothing harmless about it." The school settled on a 3-day suspension for Trevor, a slap on the wrist that left Amara feeling even more victimized than before. At home that night, as her mother carefully evened out her hair, reducing her once proud afro to a short crop close to her scalp, Amara cried silently. Not from vanity. Her hair would grow back, but from the humiliation and the injustice. "What am I supposed to do now, Mom?" she asked, wiping away tears. "Everyone will be staring at me when I go back." Dr. Johnson took her daughter's face in her hands. "You hold your head high just like always, but you also show them who you really are." What Trevor and his friends didn't know, what nobody at West Side High knew, was that Amara Johnson wasn't just another transfer student. Before moving to this town, she had been the junior boxing champion in her weight class for 3 consecutive years in Philadelphia. Boxing had been her father's passion before he passed away 5 years ago, and she had carried on his legacy, training religiously until her mother's new job forced them to relocate. The morning after the incident, Amara woke up before dawn. She laced up her running shoes and headed to the basement, where she had set up a small training area. Her mother found her there, throwing punches at the heavy bag, sweat dripping down her newly cropped hair. "I'm not going to fight him, Mom," Amara said, sensing her mother's concern. "But I'm not going to hide either." Dr. Johnson nodded. "Your father would be proud of you. Just remember what he always said. A true boxer knows when not to throw a punch," Amara finished, smiling for the first time since the incident. When Amara walked into school the following Monday, conversations hushed as heads turned to stare at her newly cropped hair. She had decided to own it, wearing her short natural style with an elegant headband. Some students whispered sympathetically, others avoided eye contact altogether. Trevor, back from his brief suspension, made a show of laughing with his friends when he spotted her. "Nice haircut," he called out, emboldened by his minimal punishment. "Much better than that bush you had before." Instead of ignoring him, Amara stopped. The hallway grew quiet as she turned and walked directly toward Trevor. Students parted like the Red Sea, expecting confrontation. Trevor's smirk faltered slightly, but he stood his ground, towering over her. "There's a charity boxing exhibition this weekend at the community center," Amara said clearly, her voice carrying through the silent hallway. "They're raising money for the children's hospital. I signed up as one of the fighters, and they need volunteers to spar with us for the demonstration rounds." She held out a flyer. "Since you seem to enjoy picking on people, I thought you might want to try it with someone who can fight back." Trevor's friends oohed at the challenge. Red-faced, Trevor snatched the flyer. "You think I'm scared of you? Just because you signed up for some charity boxing thing doesn't make you tough." Amara shrugged. "Guess we'll find out Saturday, 3 o'clock, unless you're afraid to show up." Word spread quickly about the challenge. By lunchtime, half the school was planning to attend the charity exhibition. Trevor, unable to back down, without losing face, boasted loudly about how he would go easy on her because she was a girl. Saturday arrived, and the community center was packed. Trevor strutted in wearing brand-new boxing gear that still had price tags hanging from it. He spotted Amara in the corner with a weathered older man, Coach Wilson, who had been training with her all week, helping her get back into form. "That's him?" the coach asked, eyeing Trevor. Amara nodded. Coach Wilson shook his head. "Remember what we discussed. This isn't about revenge. It's about respect." When it was their turn to demonstrate, Trevor and Amara climbed into the ring. The announcer introduced them, then added something that made Trevor freeze. Amara Johnson, 3-time Philadelphia junior boxing champion in the 125-pound weight class. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Trevor looked at Amara with new eyes as she bounced lightly on her feet, her movements fluid and practiced. The bell rang, and Trevor clumsily rushed forward, throwing a wild punch that Amara easily sidestepped. "For 2 minutes," she simply defended, letting Trevor tire himself out. His face grew red with exertion and frustration as every punch met empty air. Then, with precise control, Amara began to counter, not with power, but with skill. A light jab here, a quick hook there, each punch perfectly placed to demonstrate technique without causing injury. By the final bell, Trevor was breathing hard, embarrassment written across his sweaty face. Amara had completely outclassed him without ever throwing a heavy punch. The crowd erupted in applause, not just for her boxing skills, but for her restraint. The community center rang with applause as the exhibition match ended. Amara stood in the center of the ring, barely winded, while Trevor hunched over with his hands on his knees, struggling to catch his breath. Sweat poured down his face, partially from exertion, but mostly from humiliation. For 3 rounds, he had swung wildly, aggressively, desperately, and connected with nothing but air. Meanwhile, Amara had moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years perfecting her craft, slipping his punches with subtle shifts of her body weight, countering with light, precisely placed jabs that demonstrated her skill without inflicting real damage. The crowd began to disperse as the announcer called the next participants. Trevor remained frozen in place, staring at the canvas as though it might provide some explanation for what had just happened. His expensive new gloves, which his father had purchased just yesterday from a high-end sporting goods store, suddenly felt heavy and fraudulent on his hands. He had no idea how to remove them. Amara approached him cautiously. She had been prepared for many possible outcomes today: his anger, his refusal to participate, perhaps even a continued display of arrogance, but not for this quiet, almost shell-shocked defeat. Something in his posture reminded her of a much younger boy, not the swaggering bully who had humiliated her in front of the entire school. "Here, let me help you with those," she said, reaching for his gloves. Trevor flinched slightly at her proximity, but then nodded, extending his hands. With practiced movements, Amara unlaced his right glove and pulled it off, then did the same with his left. His hands beneath were pale and uncalloused, revealing how foreign this experience had been for him. "You could have hurt me," he muttered, finally meeting her eyes. His voice was low enough that only she could hear it over the noise of the bustling community center. "I saw what you can do. Why didn't you?" Amara took a moment before answering, thinking about the countless times she had imagined this confrontation over the past week. In her most vengeful fantasies, she had pictured herself landing a perfect hook to his jaw, watching him crumple to the canvas while everyone who had laughed at her humiliation witnessed his. But when the moment actually came, those thoughts had vanished, replaced by her father's voice, repeating the mantra he had taught her from her very first day in the gym. "Boxing isn't about hurting people. It's about mastering yourself." "That's not what boxing is about," she replied, echoing her father's wisdom. "My dad taught me that a true boxer respects their opponent and themselves too much to fight from anger. He used to say that anyone can throw a punch, but it takes discipline to know when not to." Trevor absorbed her words silently, his brow furrowed. The protective shell of arrogance that usually surrounded him seemed to have cracked, revealing glimpses of something more complex. Beneath insecurity, confusion, perhaps even shame. He glanced around the community center, taking in the simple equipment, the worn mats, the faded inspirational posters on the walls. This world was entirely unfamiliar to him, yet somehow Amara moved through it with a confidence he had never seen from her at school. "How long have you been boxing?" he asked, his voice still quiet but with genuine curiosity now. Amara smiled slightly, remembering. "Since I was 7. My dad was a boxer in his youth. Never made it big, but he loved it. After he passed away when I was 11, I kept training. It was my way of staying connected to him." She paused, then added, "We had to move here because of Mom's new job. I hadn't found a new gym until this week." Trevor nodded slowly, processing this new information about a girl he had reduced to a single characteristic: her hair, without ever considering the fullness of her life or experiences. The realization made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't quite articulate. Coach Wilson approached them, carrying Amara's water bottle and towel. He was a barrel-chested man in his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Good control out there, Amara," he said, handing her the water. Then he turned his assessing gaze to Trevor. "You've got natural power, young man, but no technique. You telegraph your punches from a mile away." Trevor blinked in surprise, unused to such direct criticism. I've never actually boxed before," he admitted. The coach nodded as though this confirmed what he already knew. "Most people haven't. That's why they underestimate what it takes." He looked between the two teenagers, sensing the tension. "I'll give you 2 a minute," he said, patting Amara's shoulder before walking away. An awkward silence fell between them. Around the community center, other matches continued, the sounds of gloves hitting pads and coaches calling out instructions, creating a familiar rhythm that Amara found comforting. For Trevor, it was all still foreign and intimidating. "I don't get it," he finally said. "If you could fight like this, why didn't you stand up to me that day in the hallway?" Amara took a long drink of water before answering. "Because fighting in school would have gotten me expelled, and this scholarship is my ticket to college. Besides," she added with a pointed look, "boxing isn't about starting fights. It's about discipline and self-respect." Trevor looked down, at his hands flexing his fingers. I've never been hit before, he admitted. Not really. My dad always said if anyone tried, I should hit them back harder. He paused. But you could have, and you didn't. Would it have taught you anything if I had? Amara asked. The question hung in the air between them. Trevor had no immediate answer. The noise of the community center seemed to fade as he genuinely considered her words, perhaps the first time he had ever been forced to examine his own behavior through someone else's perspective. After a long moment, he reached up and ran a hand through his own hair, an unconscious gesture that did not go unnoticed by Amara. Then, with visible effort, he extended his hand toward her. I was wrong about you, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. And I'm sorry about your hair. Amara looked at his outstretched hand, remembering the feeling of his fingers grabbing her hair, the sound of the razor, the humiliation that had followed. Forgiveness wasn't as simple as a handshake. And yet, standing before her was not the same boy who had assaulted her in that hallway, or perhaps it was the same boy, but one who was seeing her clearly for the first time. She took his hand, her grip firm. It'll grow back, she said. But next time you think about bullying someone because they look different from you, remember how it felt to be in that ring with me. Trevor nodded, a flush of embarrassment coloring his cheeks. I will. He hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I think your hair looks good like this too. Amara raised an eyebrow. I don't need your approval of my appearance, Trevor. That's kind of the whole point. Right. Sorry. He looked genuinely abashed, and Amara felt a small, surprising flicker of compassion. Whatever home life had shaped Trevor into the bully he'd become, it clearly hadn't taught him how to recognize or admit his mistakes. As they left the ring, several of Amara's new friends from the community center surrounded her, offering congratulations and support. Trevor hung back, suddenly the outsider in this space where Amara was clearly respected and admired. He watched as she laughed with a younger girl who was asking rapid-fire questions about her technique, noting how different she seemed here. Confident, at ease, generous with her knowledge. When the crowd around her dissipated, Trevor approached once more. Do they have programs here for beginners? He asked hesitantly. Like absolute beginners? Amara studied him carefully, trying to determine if this was some kind of joke or trick. But his expression held none of the mockery she was accustomed to seeing at school. If anything, he looked vulnerable, which was so at odds with the Trevor. Matthews, she knew that she almost didn't know how to respond. They do, she said finally. Coach Wilson runs classes 3 evenings a week, but it's not like those fancy boxing fitness studios in the mall. This is real boxing, and Coach doesn't. Go easy on anyone. Trevor nodded, looking around the humble facility with new eyes. I think I'd like to learn the right way. In the weeks that followed, Amara's life at West Side High gradually transformed. The story of the exhibition match spread throughout the school, growing more elaborate with each retelling. Some versions had her knocking Trevor unconscious with a single punch. Others claimed she had given an impassioned speech about racial justice while defeating him. The truth was less dramatic, but perhaps more impactful. She had shown restraint when revenge was within her grasp, and in doing so had demonstrated a strength that had nothing to do with physical power. Her newly cropped hair began to grow back, and she experimented with different styles, no longer feeling that she needed to conform to anyone else's expectations. A small group of girls, some black, some not, began approaching her for advice on embracing their natural hair textures, leading to impromptu lunchtime discussions about beauty standards and cultural identity that soon became one of the highlights of her week. True to his word, Trevor showed up at the community center the following Tuesday evening, looking uncomfortable in basic workout clothes, his expensive gear nowhere to be seen. Coach Wilson put him through the same fundamental drills as the 10-year-olds just starting out, teaching him proper stance, how to wrap his hands, how to move his feet. Trevor struggled, his natural athleticism not translating easily to the technical precision boxing demanded. But to Amara's surprise, he returned the next session, and the one after that. 1 month after the exhibition, Amara decided to start a formal program at the community center specifically for kids who had experienced bullying. She worked with Coach Wilson to develop exercises that built confidence and self-protection skills while emphasizing respect and restraint. The program quickly attracted participants, creating a diverse group of young people who might never have interacted otherwise. To everyone's surprise, perhaps most of all his own, Trevor showed up one afternoon as they were setting up for a session. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, watching as Amara demonstrated a basic defensive move to a middle school girl who reminded her painfully of herself at that age. "Can I help?" he asked when she noticed him. "I'm not very good yet, but I could. Hold pads or something?" Amara considered him for a long moment. Trevor Matthews, whose family name adorned the school gymnasium, whose presence had once filled her with dread, now stood before her asking to volunteer his time to help the very types of kids he might have tormented months ago. People could change. She had to believe that? Or what was the point of any of this? "We can always use more help," she said finally. "But there are rules here. Respect everyone, no matter their skill level. No teasing, ever. And remember that some of these kids have been through things you might not understand." Trevor nodded, solemnly. "I'm learning," he said, "not just about boxing, about a lot of things." As the session began, Amara watched him working patiently with a shy 10-year-old boy, showing him how to make a proper fist, the same technique Coach Wilson had shown him just weeks before. His transformation wasn't complete and might never be. Unlearning prejudice and privilege was a lifelong process, but it was a start. As for Amara's hair, it began to grow back, stronger than before. Some days she missed her Afro, the crown she had cultivated for years, but when she looked in the mirror now, she saw more than just her hair. She saw her father's determination in her eyes, her mother's dignity in her posture, and her own hard-won wisdom in her smile. Those qualities, she had learned, could never be taken from her, not by a bully's razor, not by anyone. She was Amara Johnson, daughter, student, boxer, teacher, and she was just getting started.